similar to a sign, except instead of 12 of them, there's 27. If you know the place and time of your birth, the chart that is calculated from that information is good anywhere on the planet. Now there are, this is the absolute truth about astrology, right? There are such things as local astrological influences, but these are secondary. The primary astrological influence is based on your place and time of birth. And that's good anywhere, no matter where you go on the planet. In fact, you'll even see in some interpretations on the chart that you're destined to travel, or you can have an opportunity to make a good living in another place on the planet or something like that. In other words, knowledge of astrology from Vedic calculations is absolute and universal. You can't see in the camera, but actually I'm looking at a projection, a big projection of the whole screen. No, Omar, that's built by the Persians when they ruled India about 500-600 years ago. The Persians were very advanced in astrology. They also followed the Vedic texts. I wish the devotees were more knowledgeable about astrology, and it would save them from so much trouble. Because through astrology you can recognize, for example, who is a bona fide spiritual teacher, who is a liberated soul. You can see all these things in the astrological chart.
How about you eat?
Shh. Well, the whole idea is that space-time is not flat. In the Cartesian Newtonian model of physics, space-time is flat and linear. In other words, the seconds of time tick away by the hands of the clock, and 1 second is the same as any other second. One moment or minute is the same as any other minute. But we don't accept that theory. That theory is crippled. You can understand, for example, when you're listening to a beautiful piece of music, 1 minute goes by very quickly. But when you're sitting in the dentist chair, 1 minute can be very slow. So different moments of time have different subjective qualities based on the influence of the planets according to our chart. When you bring in all those Western ideas like mass and space-time, it just confuses the issue, because the shape of time is much more complicated, much more convoluted than Western science can understand. They don't understand because they haven't brought in the concept of consciousness as being fundamental, even though Einstein brought it in kind of through the back door. We discussed that on our recent post in Naimisharanya Forum about objectification and identification and elementalism. Einstein, in his theory, he realized that actually every observer has his own coordinate system. And really what he was doing is he was bringing in the concept of the absolute nature of the soul and supersoul. Wherever the soul goes, the supersoul is also there. And the supersoul is the center or the origin of all coordinate systems. So therefore, each and every one of us has our own coordinate system and our own system of measurement. So what appears to be a very short moment or a very beautiful moment for one person will be a very long moment for another person. I used this example in a podcast one time. There are two people in a temple. I've seen this many, many times. One person is standing there looking at the deity like, "Ah, Krishna," and having this wonderful experience of devotion. And another person is standing there, you know, looking at his watch. "Oh, when are we going to go?" bored out of his mind. Huh? It's the same temple, the same deity, the same moment, yet one person is having a very deep spiritual experience, the other person is simply bored. So the reality that each one experiences is due to their state of consciousness, their ontology, and the understanding and insight that they bring to the experience. So really, the influence of the planets is not as strong as the influence of consciousness. The influence of consciousness is determined by the ontology that we possess. In other words, our understanding, our background knowledge of how the world works and what's really important. So our values and our ontology determine how we experience different things because they give us the possibilities of experience and the limits of our experience, and also our values. What do we consider more important? What do we consider less important? So the state of consciousness that a person is in is actually more important, more influential than the planets. The planets do have some influence though, and the more conditioned by material consciousness we are, the more influence the planets have. We've experienced this again and again in doing astrological readings for different people, that when someone is enlightened or advanced in spiritual life, the different planetary changes have very little influence on their life. But when somebody is in in material consciousness, then the planets have a lot of influence. Is that another question?
Jyotish describes the effect time has on consciousness. Is that right?
Yes, in general, that's right. And the particular influence that it has will depend on, as I was saying, how spiritually advanced the person is. The more spiritually advanced we are, the more choice we have about whether to accept or reject the influences. It's just like, I don't know if you've ever been surfing, but if you're surfing and wave comes along, depending on how you orient your surfboard, you can either take the wave, go for a ride, or you can pass on it and wait for the next one. So that's kind of what it's like when you're enlightened or spiritually advanced. You have the ability either to accept or reject the waves of gravitational or energetic influence that come from the planets. If you're not so advanced, then you don't have a choice and you get swept along by the wave. The material universe is more or less a machine. And just like with any machine, the more intelligent we are, the more we're able to influence the operation of the machine. For example, if we have a car and our car breaks down, if we understand the principle of operation of the car, we can repair it. But if we don't understand how a car operates, we're helpless. We have to call a mechanic or have the car towed into the shop. So it depends on our degree of understanding of the self, the human condition, the body and mind, and the way the material world operates, how much influence we have over our own activities, over the different astrological influences and so forth. If we're developed in consciousness, then we can actually choose to ignore a particular influence, or we know how to deal with it well enough that it doesn't disturb us. That's the value of astrology. For example, what was it? A couple of weeks ago, there was this really bad astrological day, and everybody was suffering.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Oh, that Mars-Pluto thing, or whatever it was. Oh, yeah. Remember, Florian, that's when you went on that trip with your friends? You couldn't have picked a worse time. Yeah. Yeah. That was when there was a very heavy astrological influence, and anyone who was not spiritually conscious got completely caught up in it. And people were fighting like cats and dogs, and oh, it was nasty. So I just stayed in the house and preached. chanted and preached, you know, and I was virtually untouched by it. I could feel it going on around me, but it didn't really affect me because I had transcendental engagement. So the advantage of Bhakti Yoga is it takes us out of those material influences, makes us actually immune to them. You don't have to be really expert in Jyotish to be able to look at your chart and the current transits and see when you're going to have a good day, when you're going to have a bad day, when you're going to have to apply a lot of willpower to correct the influences, when things are going to sneak up on you and when they're going to be really plain and obvious. That's really the value of this course, I think. Not so much that you're trying to become a professional astrologer or something like that through this course, but that you're trying to get enough